welcome to another episode of Tell Me More, which is your chance to ask all of your burning news questions to the people that actually wrote that news in the first place. If you've seen any of the headlines, or perhaps you haven't, even better, that you're here, you will have seen that Labor has finally put out its federal election costings. So where they're going to find all of the money to fund all of their election promises, or kind of. We also know that the Liberals haven't announced yet, and there's now news about P and S and the global credit rating and all of these things going on. It's a lot of financial mumbo jumbo, which is exactly why we've brought in the brilliant, the inimitable Patrick Commins, our economics editor. How are you going, Patrick?
Yeah, I'm doing really well, thank you.
I've very much enlisted you to help explain all of this to us. Everyone can leave, just a reminder, leave questions the whole time throughout the live stream. You can do that either on the TikTok or the YouTube live stream. Instagram's a bit more difficult. Leave your questions the whole way through, anything you want to know, especially stuff related to the economics of the election in general. That maybe just whatever comes to mind, it will be great. But look, to start off, I was wondering whether you might just be able to walk us through, Patrick, what is election costings? What are we even talking about when we're talking about this? It seems like everyone's been saying this word and expecting us to know what it means.
Yeah, so during an election campaign, the parties will make a lot of promises, a lot of commitments, and at some stage they need to come clean with us, or as clean as they can, or are willing to, or are required to the letter of the law, to tell us about how much those are going to cost, so that when we go to the ballot on Saturday, we know that yes, they're going to spend X billions on this, and this is how much it's going to cost, and it puts it all together, and you get a feel for, well, can we afford it? Are they offsetting all this spending somewhere else? So overall, we'll have a feel for, okay, overall they've committed $10 billion, but they've balanced this out against $8 billion in savings. Overall, it's $2 billion, all these elections. It's that kind of thing. So we just have this extra level of understanding about what their election commitments are going to mean for the budget and for the financial position of the country. And it's compulsory. They have to give it to us. They have to give it to us. Sounds like, I mean, a day before.
This is what I was going to ask. Like, a lot of people have already voted. Early voting is open. You can go to a polling booth.
Number.
Well, yeah, not right now, but as of 8 a.m. tomorrow, and today, you could go to a polling booth and vote. Like, why are we only now finding out if we can afford the stuff that they're promising?
Well, we're only finding out now because they, A, don't have to until the very last minute, and B, don't want to until the very last minute, because it's much easier and much more attractive to make promises about all the spending you can do. And it's a real bummer having to say how much it's going to cost and how you're going to afford it. That's a complicating factor when you're trying to, kind of win votes. So they just leave it until the last minute. To be fair, Labor have already done it. They released their costings just yesterday, and it looks like it goes, kind of department by department. What are the new policies? How much they're going to cost in each year, and any savings by department as well. So it's all laid out quite clearly in it. So they have already put it out, and then the coalition have kind of, they've given us an idea of the kind of things they're going to do, but they haven't given us the full costings thing, which I suspect they will wait until the last minute.
Yeah, for sure. Like, March 2nd. 11:59.
Yeah. Maybe not 11:59. It's probably got to be close of business, to be fair. So, but
okay. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry for not being generous enough.
That's right. Yeah. So I think it's one of those things where it's required. It's it's great practice, but they wait until the last minute, and then the things that they actually do say in terms of how they're going to offset the spending are often a bit whiffy.
Yeah, so I was about to ask this, which is, we had Torrin Halley on Instagram ask, does it actually matter as much as we're led to believe, these costings? And I guess, also I was keen to know, how much do we trust them as well?
Yeah, well, it definitely matters. It's really important that they are in some way transparent about what this means. I mean, otherwise they could just be making promises willy-nilly, and we wouldn't really. A real feature of this campaign, which we've written about, is this kind of idea of a vibes election, where they put out these policy ideas, don't give us much detail, and they just kind of move on to the next thing, and we're left asking for more details. They don't have them, so in that way, it's important that at least there's some mechanism where they actually have to front up and say, okay, this is how we're going to pay for things or not. So it matters. The other question is, how much can we trust them? Well, I mean, it's a little bit one of those cases where you have for example, with Labor's costings, they had a 6 or 10 billion. They had a $6 billion savings through cutting down on the use of consultants and labour hire and external services in the public service. And that very neatly, alongside with provisions in previous budget, cancelled out all their new spending commitments. Oh, isn't that great? It's like, oh, great. That's very convenient. Maybe they can do that. Maybe they can't. It's untestable, but they have a good story to tell, and they'll tell it.
For sure. Look, I won't lie to you. I briefly cut out there. Did you mention about Labor's where they're finding that money from?
Yeah, I was just saying how it was labour hire, consultants, and external services. Yeah.
Yes,
about $6 billion over 4 years.
Actually, before we quite get on to the consultants of it all, because I have a lot of consultant questions. We had Charlie on TikTok ask, are budget deficits inherently bad? Why is it that why is this policy such a big talking point during elections?
The policy in terms of, you mean just
yes, the constant discussion of, are we in the black? Are we in the red? Is the deficit growing? Is it spending? How are they going to fund everything? All of that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not bad. I mean, our deficits generally have been small. They're not large deficits, particularly compared to other countries overseas. It's not like our budget is in a terrible, terrible nick. Running small deficits is okay. It's a bit of a boiling frog problem. It's kind of, you run deficits year after year after year, and you're doing a lot of spending, and you're paying for that spending by borrowing, because you can't pay for it out of your kind of revenue. So you borrow some money to pay for that little bit that you can't afford. And so what happens is that over time, your debt grows. You owe more and more and more. That's not a problem until it is. It's hard to know at what point you really need to start freaking out about it. It's one of those things where you should practice good financial hygiene, I suppose, kind of on an ongoing basis, and that stops you getting into trouble later and having to have like kind of root canal. Gosh, I really pushed that metaphor as far as I can, I think. But that is the idea. So it's not like it's a hysteria. We shouldn't be hysterical about the fact that we're running small deficits. We should be worried that really there's no sign of us getting a balanced budget in the next decade. And even then, to get to that, it's pretty heroic. And then we're spending more on defense, aging population. There's a lot of structural pressures on the budget. So we're not moving in the right direction, and the pressures are getting greater. So that's a kind of a long-winded answer to it. We don't need to be panicking about it now. We need to have an eye for the future. The problem is with politicians, their eyes, their ability to look beyond the election cycle, the daily news cycle is limited. So that's why we constantly have people talking about the deficits, because they kind of want to keep reminding. It's a bit like climate change, right? You want to keep reminding people it's an issue. We've got to do something about it now, even if we're not all boiling. So it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, feels like they talk about the deficit more than climate change, perhaps.
Fair. Yeah.
Which actually leads me in. Maddie from TikTok was also wanting to know, how far are we actually in debt compared to different countries?
Yeah, not very far. Our net debt is like 30% worth about 30% of our economy off the top of my head. There are a lot of other economies where it's close to 100%. We're looking pretty good internationally. We look pretty good. It's another example of a case where we don't need to be freaking out about our debt levels now. We need to be concerned about the direction of travel. And you look at the states. The states' finances are in an absolute mess. Their debt is equal to about the size of their economy. The deficits, a part of a technical definition, is about 6 to 7% of GDP. That's compared to about 1% for us. So they're just running huge deficits, living way beyond their means. Yeah,
that's so interesting, because I think I think I've heard that before, but when you are stuck in the daily news cycle and you read it, you do sort of feel like Australia is almost in the same position as the US, because a lot of the rhetoric sort of feels the same. It's interesting to hear how starkly different we are.
Yeah, we are starkly different, but there's a major difference. Is that the America is just such a huge part of the global economy. It's the world's biggest and most important. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency. There's so many transactions, so many things priced in US dollars. When going gets tough, people want to buy US debt. They're a bit their own entity. They can keep doing these things, and it doesn't really affect their debt rating, which might be another thing you might want to talk about.
Oh my gosh!
Look at that for a segue.
A little foreshadowing, a little tease. Someone's read the episode out.
Boy, you missed a lot.
I'm just sorry. Let me just hear in my ear. Oh, okay. We're both back now. We just cut out for a second. I like to do. It's just an AirPod, but I do like to do that just so it really seems like I'm talking to the to the people in the studio. We mentioned, yes, Australia in debt, but not terribly in debt. Speaking of debt, can we talk about, yes, how are Labor going to pay for these costings that they've just released? And actually, now that we're back, I will just remind everyone, feel free to leave your comments in the TikTok and Instagram chat as everything goes along. Comments, but also, more importantly, questions as well. Ask us anything. Labor, how are they going to pay for all of the promises they've made?
Okay, so I think there's about $10 billion in new spending since the budget. And so since the pre-election fiscal outlook, so about $4 billion of that they've already provided for. So they've created special pools of excuse me, it's my dog. They created special pools of money within the previous budget to pay for kind of stop that dog to pay for things that they announced later. So that covers a part of it. And then with the new costings, we just discovered this week that they are going to find another $6 billion, $6.4 billion to pull out of the public service in terms of labor hire and consultants and external services. So the things that, try to bring more of what the public service does in-house and save money on paying external people and labor hire people. It's been a push they've been doing for a while. So between what they provided for, these newfound savings, abracadabra, they've paid for everything.
Now, I've gone several times, and that's because $6.4 billion does seem like a lot for consultants, which does raise the question, and that's not the entire consulting budget, that's just what they could trim, which does make me wonder, first of all, what does a consultant do?
And how do I become one? Well, maybe the job security is not so good. Yeah, so it's not just consultants, it's labor hire. It's a lot of external services. So, a lot of call centers could be outsourced. They do, maybe they hire people to do quality inspections at aged care centers, those kind of things. So it's not, so 70% of the kind of in 21-22, it was about $21 billion that the public service Commonwealth was spending on all this stuff, and 70% of that was external services, and that is those things that I was just talking about, like call centers and stuff. So it's not all consultants. Consultants actually, I think, are like a smaller part of it. It's more that all these services and these things that the government doesn't do by itself, it pays someone else to do. And that was ramped up during the coalition because they thought that was a great way to save money on public servants. And so until it became expensive by itself, and now Labor's going back the other way and they're trying to trim it, and they say they can save money. So it's funny. So the coalition said that they could save money by ramping it up, and Labor says they can save money by pulling it back. So,
well, that's interesting because, I mean, a big thing Dutton's been saying is that he wants to sort of save money through ramping down the public service, like in and of itself. But then we've also seen sort of ramping down in and of itself increase the consulting cost
exactly
as well.
Yeah, so that's the other side of it, right? And even with Labor too. I mean, if they're cutting all these consultants, external services, Labor hire, then they need to hire more public servants. So that comes at a cost as well. So and it's not an easy thing. I mean, maybe they can do it. It's very hard to test. It's very hard to know. And that's why coming out, a few days before an election saying, hey, guess what? We found billions of dollars in extra savings we reckon we can make to pay for our election promises just makes me
raises an eyebrow.
Yes, it raises an eyebrow. Yeah.
And so, I mean, when we're talking about election promises, we're talking about some pretty hefty stuff, sort of 8.1, I want to say off the top of my head, billion on Medicare, huge, like big spending. And I do notice that 6.4 is a lower number than 8.1. Yeah. Where's the rest of the money coming from? Have we ended up with a sort of balance sheet, or is there still a little bit like, we'll figure it out later?
No, they reckon they'll be better off by about $1 billion over 4 years. So they reckon we're going to end up better off. And that's that difference that you're talking about, have 6.4 billion. Well, there's another 700 million, but, of increasing the cost of student fees or something like that for international students. But then there's others that this is what I was talking about before. Maybe you cut out when I was stunning everyone with this information. But
I'm the last one to know.
In the last budget, they put aside money for future things. So some of it was provided for. They'd had it in provision. So they have these buckets of money in the budget that they put in there for decisions taken but not yet announced, where they've kind of provided for it. They know they're going to announce it later, and they just kind of make a line item in the budget. So when they announce it, we've already accounted for it. So that's kind of how it ends up balancing, the difference between 6.4 or 7.1 and what they've actually committed to. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. You mentioned it feels neat that they've come out with costings a few days before the election, exactly, the right or even a little bit more. What's the general vibe on these costings? Has it been a positive reception? Has it been a skeptical reaction? What's the kind of tone?
Yeah, I think it is. I think a lot of kind of old hands in the press gallery, a lot of raised eyebrows and rolling of eyes. It's not uncommon for a government to at the last minute go, oh, guess what, there's all these savings we can find, and everyone goes, oh, really? That's convenient. So there's a little bit of that. There's been a few people we're reporting in the Guardian today talking to kind of former public service commissioners, just saying, well, it's pretty hard. Like the more you cut, the harder it gets to cut. And then they've already tried to cut a lot, and now they're going to cut even more. Well, the easy gains have already been made essentially, and it becomes harder from here. So there's a bit of people looking askance at that as well. And then there's the other thing, which I was saying, is the more you cut labour hire and consultants and external services, well, you probably need to spend more on hiring public servants.
For sure. Now, the Liberal Party or the coalition in general haven't announced. Do we have any sense of where their kind of sort of suitcase full of gold buried in the backyard is going to come from?
Yeah, we do. They've said a few things. They're going to scrap the HEX relief. the 20% cut to HECS debts. They're going to pull the Commonwealth funding for the Melbourne rail loop. No, you know that one. It's a bit of a boondoggle. They're calling it a boondoggle. I'd probably agree.
Are we talking little city loop or big suburban
We're
loop?
talking the one that hasn't passed any of the assessments as being worthwhile. I can't remember
the one that we've all Melburnians have kind of all collectively put in the we'll get it when we get the right.
And it was a bit of a kind of a darling of the Dan Andrews government. And anyway, so it hasn't passed any of the kind of cost benefit analyses, but it keeps going ahead. And so they promised to pull money from that, so they'll make a little bit of money there. So they have announced a few things here and there. Production tax credits for some of the money that they were going to give to miners, critical minerals miners. They say they're going to unwind that. EVs, those EV subsidies, they're going to pull them back, although they're going back and forth a bit on that. So they've done bits and pieces. So to be fair, they've announced a few things, but not enough yet, because they did also match the Medicare stuff, and also they've committed to this massive increase, pretty big increase in defence spending. Overall.
Yeah, I was going to say, feels like they've promised even more than Labor this time around, which, maybe not. Maybe that's just the perception because it's in large chunks, but they do have some big chunks.
Yeah, no, you could be right. Yeah, it'd be interesting putting them next to each other. Neither side have been shy in making promises, that's for sure.
Yeah, sort of a make it rain type election. I'm going to ask very shortly, and reminder, ask all of your questions in the chat. We'll get on to people being slightly concerned about Australia's global credit score. But before we do, someone on TikTok was wanting to know your thoughts on Dutton and Albo, or Dutton specifically, not knowing the price of eggs, and also, I guess, this general circus that we have of asking politicians a random supermarket item. Is it a good economic indicator in terms of their management? What's the purpose of these questions?
Yeah, well, the purpose of these questions, they got you, right? They got your questions. So the idea is that you expose how devoid, how far away these politicians are from everyday lives of the people that they're claiming to serve. It's been used pretty effectively in the past, and this one, and I have mixed feelings about it. So there's two things, right? And so the first thing is, it's like, who thinks Albo's going to the supermarket and doing supermarket shopping, grocery shopping? I mean, he's just not. He's the Prime Minister of Australia. I don't think he's popping down and doing the weekly shopping, walking around with his trolley. I just don't think he
Coles
is.
delivery, at the very least.
Coles delivery. And even then, is he clicking the buttons? I don't know. But, so it's a little bit ridiculous in that sense. I mean, he was asked on 2GB. They were blowing up at him about, energy costs. My energy bill's through the roof. How much is the lodge? How much is the bill at the lodge increase? Do you know that, Prime Minister? He's like, well, I'm the Prime Minister.
There is a certain element of do you want the Prime Minister's time taken up with the electricity bill at the lodge?
Yeah, and it's basically ridiculous. It's a ridiculous question in that sense. On the other hand, it does show that these people they do really live very different lives from 99.9% of the population. And when it comes to them saying, we really feel your pain, cost of living, it's tough, isn't it? Eggs, they don't have an idea. They have no idea what it's like, to struggle with the cost of living at the moment. Does that mean that they can't manage the economy well, that they can't come up with great policies to help us out, to make to lift our incomes and all those kind of things? No, it doesn't. But I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm a little bit mixed feeling about it. Does it tell us much about whether Albo's a good PM? No.
Well, I mean, Albo knew $7. Dutton said $4.20 for free range.
$4.20 was laughable. But the only reason that I reckon that Albo got close was because the guy who was moderating it for Channel 7 said, more like twice that. What about you, Albo?
A
And
rigged.
more,
Oh, let's talk about
it's
bias in
conspiracy.
the
And then, and of more concern is that, so I think he said 420 or about $4, Dutton. And then Albo's like, double, 7. So I think that's more concerning, frankly. And then, yeah, and then today, I think, was it Dutton maybe didn't know the inflation rate. So, yeah, it's, I don't mind it as a question, but I mean, it doesn't really tell us much about anything beyond like
Yeah, for
kind of a
sure.
bit of,
Yeah, good to somewhat telling in a vibe sense, not particularly telling in a results sense.
yeah, that's very true. Yeah, it's true. It reminds us how like far away they are from us and how it makes it difficult for them to actually, actually really feel what we're feeling. But then on the
I
other
think
hand,
personally, I do think maybe it was better to guess so far low, because if he said just a couple of dollars low, he would have looked like he was buying caged eggs, and that's a bad look,
so it's better he had no idea about nothing. Oh, we kind of might have left someone again. But yeah.
I am so sorry for leaving you like this. How did you go? How did you go in my absence?
I just sat like a stone mullet. I thought it went really
It
well.
really looks like I made the joke about caged eggs and I like cut it out.
You're on your
We can't
own.
imply that's the one topic we're not allowed to breach.
That's right.
My gosh. Okay, on to much more cerebral things, I guess. We've had the costings come out. We've had this big, you get Medicare, you get a Medicare type of election. So now the S&P Global Group has come out and said that potentially, and I will explain this, we'll get to what this sentence means in a second. The S&P Global Credit Score Rating Group has come out and said it possibly means.
Yeah, so S&P Global they're a credit rating agency. So they assign debt scores, debt ratings. They're one of
What's
three.
a debt rating?
Well, it's just basically, it's like any rating. If it's, a good rating means that you're a good credit. People can lend to you. You're safe. You're going to repay. It's basically your capacity to repay and your probability that you're not going to be able to repay. So for someone like Australia, and they do it for whole countries. They do it for firms and businesses, but they also do it for whole countries. So Australia has a AAA credit rating. That's as good as it sounds. That's like a top one. And that means that if I'm an international investor and I want to kind of lend to Australia, then we can borrow at a lower interest rate. It's just like our credit score, right? If you and I have a really good credit score, well, it doesn't really work this way here, but in America, if you've got a really good credit score, you can get a cheaper loan. And that's the same for a country. So, and then they use these rating agencies' scores. They're really important.
Yeah. So why would the sort of big election spending put that at risk? And is it really at risk? How serious are we talking?
Well, I mean, if S&P say it is at risk, it is at risk. There's no reason not to believe them. So they look at not just Australia, not just the Commonwealth, they'll look at all the states as well. So they kind of, tally them all up because the Commonwealth would bail out a state if something happens. So they look at the whole lot, and they look at all the trends, and it's a bit what I was talking about before. They look at the trends and the way things are going, and they decide whether or not, based on that, how good your debt rating is. So they say they've been a little bit worried for a while because the states have been borrowing a lot. We've been borrowing more and more. It's the thing. It's not bad, but it's getting worse. And so they've started coming out with these occasional, things aren't looking great in Victoria, or watch out. They're kind of sounding these kind of alarms. Does it mean we're going to be downgraded, next week? No. And if it does happen, is that a massive disaster? No, but it is a sign. No one wants to be in government and have their debt rating downgraded. It's basically just saying, you did a bad job managing your country's finances, shame on you. So even if it doesn't mean that, we're suddenly going to go broke, it does mean that it's a bad look for the politicians. And it just does mean that we need to borrow at a higher interest rates. It means our loans, our borrowing is more expensive. So I hope that makes sense. So that's essentially what's happened. So at this point in the election campaign, it's interesting that S&P came out. It was just an email, just some lines. Just worried if you keep on this trajectory, you're going to start getting into trouble. It's kind of like a bit of a warning, and then Albo made fun of them.
Yeah. So was it specifically about Labor's trajectory, or was it saying both parties what they're promising, or is it more that? Yeah. What?
No, it's both parties. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's right. They're looking at kind of what has been proposed on both sides, and they're saying, well, because both of them promised to spend a lot more money. So, no, it's not so much on Labor, but they're just looking at the election promises on both sides and saying that's a lot more money. You might have to borrow more money, and your debt, it gets to a point where we might start getting worried.
And how much does this sort of thing potentially impact voters? How much is it? How will we see any effects of this, or at the polling booth, or is S&P a bit too far removed?
Oh, I think it's too far removed. I don't think this is going to really make the get on many people's radars as they're in the polling booth. No, it's a little bit. It does matter because if it turns out that they do downgrade us, we need to spend. We're paying more to service our debt. We're paying high borrowing costs. That means there's less left over to pay for all the other stuff we want to do, right? So it does make a difference, but yeah, I don't think it's going to be pretty high on people's lists. And come Saturday. Yeah.
Nick Oler on TikTok was wondering, can the debt rating go down in the single election phase, or I guess how often are these updated? What cycle is it sort of on?
Yeah, they do. They kind of do regular reviews. I'm not sure what the cycle is. It's probably 6 monthly or, maybe annually. They do a review and they'll come out and tell everyone they reviewed it and they confirmed it. And then it's as kind of needed as they feel like they want to or have to. It's kind of nice having someone like S&P just come in and just go in the middle of the election campaign, just say, you're both spending too much money, watch out, kind of, oh, okay, thanks S&P. No, that's right, because, it's hard to find kind of, third parties that will come in the middle of an election campaign with some kind of gravitas and say, you guys got to pull your heads in a bit or else you might lose your debt rating. So I found it refreshing in that sense.
At least sort of a, cat among the pigeons, at least a little.
Yeah. But, like I said, they, Albert brushed it off and
we have a question from Abby McGannu on YouTube. They were saying, just following on from this, what are ways we can actually reduce this debt? I know we've had a couple of surpluses, but what's a sustainable way to reduce the deficit in the long term?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And it's a difficult one.
I'm sure some politicians would like to hear your answer too.
Yeah, I'm sure they're all tuning in. There are ways you can do it, but and we all know how to do it. You can cut spending and raise taxes. wow, it's that simple. And then you can fix the budget. But the problem is, of course, that nobody wants their spending to be cut. And then we spend a lot of money on a lot of important things. In the same token, we don't want to, no, people don't want to pay higher taxes. So there are, they kind of do little bits of ways. I mean, the one way you can do it, which is great, is you can make the economy more dynamic. You can make it grow faster. And then everybody just, the government just generates more tax revenue. Everyone's doing better. And you kind of grow your way out of these things. Rarely happens. You can try to kind of, clamp down on, try to retool the tax system, tax super more. It's become a bit of a way just to kind of, transfer your wealth to another generation into your kids in a low tax kind of environment, which is not its point. Its point is to pay for your retirement. So there's, room there to kind of raise a bit more money out of there. They're trying as hard as they can to reduce the growth in the cost of the NDIS without, cutting too deeply into it. So they're trying their best to do that. And it's really hard.
It's when you said about like, oh, everyone knows how to do it. It's, spend less and tax more and raise taxes. Sort of seems like it's similar to that whole thing of like, how do you lose weight? Oh, we'll just eat less and exercise. And then you realize like, right. Oh wait, no, it's actually much, much more complicated than that. And there are a bunch of reasons that doesn't quite work as much as you think.
I love it. That's it. That's very right. That's very true. And there's a lot of criticism of, and the thing is with reform and making these choices is you create winners and losers. People, who are worse off as a result, even if overall, we're in a better position. And that's something that costs votes. And it's really hard as a politician these days. It seems a lot harder than it was 30, 40 years ago to get these kind of big changes through. And the reasons for that are probably, myriad, but yeah.
For sure. And look, coming into, and I will probably, just for everyone, if you've got any lingering questions, now's the time to answer them as we sort of start wrapping down. But coming up, we've got, 4-5 days left until the election. What should people be looking out for in this time? Like I guess from an economic sense, is there any economic news that could really shift the dial at this point, or just generally, how can people navigate these last couple of days?
Well, there is a big bit of economic news coming out tomorrow, which could shift the dial quite a lot, and that's the inflation figures. So watch out. That's for the March quarter, so they'll tell us about what inflation did in the year to March. And what
are we expecting for that?
Oh, we're only expecting like 2.5%. Pretty good. So about where it is now. If it and that's what is expected. And then if we get that, then everyone's going to be like, all right, Reserve Bank's going to cut rates next month. Labor's got another thing. It can say, look, we've conquered inflation. Mortgage rates are on their way down. We did it, everybody. We did it. Vote for us. So it's a great story for them. If there's a sudden and unexpected jump in inflation tomorrow, that will be a massive fly in Labor's ointment. It's hard to see it happening, but you never know. And if it does come in really strong, and then people go, oh no, the Reserve Bank can't cut rates, inflation's not under control. I mean, that is, that could be a major story and a major late development in this campaign, only days out from the election. So that's a big one to watch out for. And then in terms of policies, I suspect they've already announced most of them. It feels like they're
quarter of the country's voted. Sounds like it.
Quarter of the country's voted. That's right. Yeah,
I did just make that number up just to be so clear.
I totally believe you. Let's put it. Let's get it online. Lock it in. And so yeah. Look, I generally have a kind of a theory of last 3 years have been kind of pretty crappy for most of us. It's been a tough time. And I think what we should be looking for in a lot of these economic policies are, well, what's going to make the next 3 years better? We've lost a lot of ground. You take, $10 to the supermarket buys a lot less than it did 3 years ago. It's tough. And so I think really the thing that we should be expecting from our leaders, and as they make their pitch in the last few days, should be, what are you going to do for the next 3 years? How are we going to get out of this, kind of all the ground that we've lost in the last few years? In 3 years, are we going to be better than now? And I think that's a really great kind of filter to take to what they're saying. You might not be super impressed by what you find when you ask that question. But definitely that's something that we should all be keeping in mind, and we should all be putting pressure on our political leaders.
For sure. And before people go, a reminder to have a Google of who's in your electorate. That's, great. Just like 5 minutes after this live stream, The Guardian has a really, really awesome tool to look at all the different seats, to look at the history of your seats, what the different candidates stand for. There's tools like Build Your Ballot and Vote Compass and things like that to help everyone figure out, because you don't want to go in and realize that you don't know a single name on your ballot and you're feeling a bit lost. And also, if you're there, Voting 101, the series on The Guardian, explaining how the whole electoral system works. I heard the host is really beautiful. It's me. Thank you so much, Patrick. This has been so illuminating and so brilliant.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
A few people in the chat were sad that you didn't show us your dog when it started barking. So if he is within arm's
next time.
reach,
you want to see him? You really want to see him?
I mean, if he's there.
Oh, he's always around. He's always around.
This is the kind of hard-hitting news content we know.
This is the hard-hitting news. Oh, look at him.
Beautiful.
He looks slightly worried.
He's like, I did not actually ask to be on this live stream. All right. Thank you.
Oh, with that bombshell.
Thank you everyone for watching. Follow us on TikTok, subscribe on YouTube, all of the rest of it. We will see you